At 11:47 on Thursday, March 18, 1943, Lieutenant Garrison T. Halloway of the 91st Bombardment Group makes an impossible decision over Wegasack, Germany. His B-17's No. 3 engine is streaming white smoke. Oil pressure dropping. The formation is pulling away. Standard procedure says, feather the prop, drop out, limp home alone. But 40 Luftwaffe fighters are circling like sharks, and 6 bombers behind him are staffed by kids who've never seen combat. Halloway does something no bomber pilot has done before. Something that will get him court-martialed if he survives. In the next 8 minutes, he'll lose 6,000 feet of altitude and burn through his remaining engine life. He'll also save 23 lives and accidentally invent a tactical doctrine that will protect thousands of Allied airmen. The innovation requires no new technology, no factory production, no official approval. Just one exhausted pilot who understands that sometimes the regulations will kill you faster than the enemy. Between January and May 1943, 187 American heavy bombers are shot down over occupied Europe. Not by flak, not by direct fighter attacks on the formation, but after sustaining damage that forces them to drop out. A crippled bomber alone is a dead bomber. The Luftwaffe knows this. They wait. On February 4th, a B-17 named Carolina Moon takes a single 20mm shell through the No. 2 engine over Bremen. The pilot feathers it, drops out of formation, begins the long glide home. 12 FW-1 converge. The crew manages to shoot down one attacker before the bomber disintegrates at 18,000 feet. No parachutes observed. 10 men gone because one engine failed. The problem is doctrinal, not mechanical. The B-17 Flying Fortress is designed to fly in tight formation, the combat box, where overlapping fields of fire from multiple aircraft create a defensive sphere. 60 50 caliber machine guns protecting 20 bombers. Break formation, and that protection vanishes. You have your own 13 guns against an entire Jagdgeschwader. The mathematics are brutal. A bomber in formation has a 94% survival rate per mission. A damaged bomber alone has an 11% survival rate. Technical doctrine says damaged aircraft must leave formation to avoid collision risk and maintain bombing precision. Fighter escorts are supposed to protect stragglers, but in early 1943, P-47 Thunderbolts don't have the range to penetrate deep into Germany. The escorts turn back at the border. The damaged bombers die in the gap. On January 23, 1943, 2nd Lieutenant Morris J. Keegan, age 22, from Duluth, Minnesota, nurses his damaged B-17 alone over the North Sea. An oil line severed by flak, he's flying on 3 engines, losing altitude at 200 feet per minute. The coast of England is 40 miles away. 5 Bf-109s catch him at 8,000 feet. Keegan's gunners kill 1. The others close to point-blank range. The bomber goes down 12 miles from shore. 3 survivors pulled from the water. Keegan isn't among them. On February 11th, Captain Vincent R. Calabrese, age 26, from Newark, New Jersey, drops out over Wilhelmshaven with his No. 4 engine windmilling uselessly. He's got 30 minutes of fuel before the remaining engines quit. The formation disappears into cloud cover. Calabrese never makes it home. His wife receives notification 3 weeks later. Missing in action. Presumed dead. No body. No burial. Just gone. The official solution is the P-51 Mustang with drop tanks, a long-range escort fighter that can protect bombers all the way to Berlin and back. It's being developed. It's being tested. It'll be operational in late 1944. Maybe. Meanwhile, in spring 1943, damaged bombers are dying at a rate of 4.3 per week. The 8th Air Force is hemorrhaging experienced crews faster than replacement training can supply them. Nobody has authorized anyone to solve this problem differently. Garrison Holloway grows up in Bakersfield, California, where his father runs a crop dusting operation with 3 battered biplanes and a philosophical approach to Federal Aviation Administration regulations. Young Garrison learns to fly at 14, illegally, in a 1928 Stearman that should have been scrapped years earlier. He learns that regulations are written by people who don't have to live with the consequences. He also learns that altitude is life, that a damaged aircraft can do things the manual says it can't, and that sometimes you trust your hands over the instruments. At 17, he watches his father nurse a Jenny with a seized engine back to Earth, gliding unpowered for 11 miles, landing in a cotton field with 50 feet to spare. His father climbs out, lights a cigarette, says, "Never leave your wingman, not in the air, not ever." The formative moment comes in July 1942, during a training exercise over Arizona. Holloway is flying wing in a 3-ship formation when the lead aircraft's prop throws a blade. Catastrophic vibration. The pilot, a butter bar lieutenant named Patterson, immediately breaks formation per regulation and begins emergency descent. 2 Bf-109, a WWII mock attackers, actually P-40s with camera guns, pounce instantly. Patterson is shot down in 90 seconds. After landing, the instructors praise him for following procedure. Holloway doesn't say anything, but he's thinking. Procedure just killed Patterson 6 times over. By March 1943, Holloway is a veteran of 11 missions, flying left seat in a B-17F named Duchess of Doom. He's a first lieutenant, aircraft commander, technically in charge of 9 other men. He's also a quiet contrarian who reads after-action reports obsessively and keeps a pocket notebook full of calculations that have nothing to do with bombing accuracy. On the night of March 17, 1943, he sits in the officers' club at Bassingbourn and watches Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Preston brief the next day's mission. VEGISAC, submarine pens, deep penetration, limited fighter support. Preston mentions, almost casually, that any aircraft sustaining major damage should immediately leave formation to avoid collision. It's in the manual. Page 47, section 3.2. Holloway does the math in his notebook. If 3 bombers take serious damage, statistically likely, and all drop out, that's 30 men in 3 separate aircraft facing the wolves. Survival rate 11% each. Expected survivors, between 3 and 4 men total. But what if the damaged aircraft don't leave? What if they stay in formation on whatever engines still work, accepting the risk of collision, maintaining the protective bubble? The healthy bombers would have to slow down slightly, burn more fuel, maybe abort secondary targets. But the damaged aircraft would have an 80–90% survival rate instead of 11%. He runs the numbers 3 times. Same answer. The regulation is killing 3 times as many men as it saves. He decides, right there, that he's going to ignore it. The breakthrough isn't dramatic. There's no thunderclap, no moment of inspiration. Just Holloway sitting in his bunk at 0200 hours, unable to sleep, staring at his notebook and thinking, what if we just don't leave? The technical modification is 0. The innovation is purely doctrinal. A crippled B-17 on 2 or even 1 operational engine can maintain 140 mph highest airspeed at reduced altitude. A formation can slow from 180 mph to 150 mph without significant loss of defensive capability. The math works, the physics works. The only thing that doesn't work is Regulation 3.2, page 47. Holloway briefs his crew the next morning, quietly, no dramatic speeches. If we take damage today and I can keep us airborne, we're staying with the formation. I don't care what the book says. I don't care what lead ship signals. We stay in the box. Questions? His co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Raymond Fisk, age 23 from Portland, Oregon, asks, "What if Colonel Preston orders us out?" Holloway looks at him. "Then I'll be the one facing the court-martial. Not you. I'm giving the order. You're following it." The ball turret gunner, Sergeant Emil Kovac, age 19, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, says, "Good. I'm tired of watching guys die alone." That's the entire implementation meeting. 4 minutes. No memos. No approval chain. Just 10 men agreeing to ignore the regulation that's been killing their friends. The test happens 90 minutes later. At 11:47 over Vegesack, a 20mm cannon shell from a head-on attacking FW-190 punches through the number 3 engine cowling and severs the oil feed line. Holloway watches the oil pressure gauge drop from 60 psi to 35 to 18 in 30 seconds. The engine begins running rough. White smoke streams back over the wing. Standard procedure: feather the prop immediately to prevent catastrophic failure and possible fire. The formation is pulling ahead. Colonel Preston's lead ship flashes the signal. Damaged aircraft depart formation. Holloway ignores it. He feathers number 3, advances throttles on, chauffeur, the remaining 3 engines to maximum continuous power, and noses down slightly to maintain position. The B-17 shudders but holds. Airspeed drops to 155 mph. The formation, responding to his position, unconsciously slows to match him. Preston signals again. Depart formation. Holloway reaches up and switches his command radio to intercom only. He can't hear Preston anymore. Problem solved. Behind him, 6 bombers full of rookie crews watch this happen. They see Holloway's damaged aircraft holding position. They see the formation adjusting. They see for the first time a damaged bomber not dying alone. The FW-190s come back. 40 fighters from JG-1, the most experienced Jagdgeschwader on the Western Front. They're used to picking off stragglers. But there are no stragglers today. Every bomber is in the box. The defensive fire is unbroken. The lead German pilot, Oberleutnant Klaus Dortmann, makes 3 passes at Holloway's smoking B-17, the obvious weak target. Each time he enters range, he faces fire from 1650 caliber guns, Holloway's own turrets, plus supporting fire from adjacent aircraft. Dortmann lands later with 11 holes in his fighter and deep confusion. The Americans have changed something. He doesn't know what. The Luftwaffe shoots down 2 B-17s that day, both from direct catastrophic damage, both dying instantly. 0 stragglers, 0 kill ratio. Holloway brings Duchess of Doom home on 3 engines, lands with 7 gallons of fuel remaining, and shuts down expecting immediate arrest. Instead, 6 pilots corner him on the hardstand. How did you do that? Holloway is covered in sweat, shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline dump. He says, "I just didn't leave. Formation slowed down. That's it." Captain Wendell J. Hauser, age 28 from Sacramento, California, says, "Colonel Preston is going to hang you." Holloway nods. "Probably." Lieutenant Marcus T. Delacroix, age 24 from New Orleans, Louisiana, says, "Fuck Preston. How many guys didn't die today because you stayed?" Nobody has an answer, but everyone knows the answer. That night, nothing happens. No court-martial, no official reprimand. Preston files a report noting irregular formation discipline, but doesn't name names. He's a career officer. He understands that sometimes you don't see things. The innovation spreads like wildfire through the ready rooms and maintenance hangars of the 91st Bombardment Group. Not through official channels. Through whispered conversations and notebook scribbles and mechanics explaining to pilots that maybe, just maybe, you don't have to die alone. The first 3 adopters are Captain Hauser, Lieutenant Delacroix, and Captain Irene Rip Sutherland, one of the few female ferry pilots who've managed to wrangle combat assignments through creative interpretation of regulations. She shouldn't be flying combat. She's doing it anyway. She and Holloway recognize each other immediately as kindred spirits. On March 22nd, Hauser takes flak damage over Bremen. Number 2, engine dead. Number 4, running rough. He stays in formation. The entire group slows to 145 mph. Hauser makes it home. 0 casualties. On March 25th, Delacroix loses his number 1 engine over Wilhelmshaven. He stays in formation. The defensive box holds. The FW-190s break off after taking too much fire. Delacroix lands safely. On March 29th, Sutherland loses 2 engines over Hamburg, 1 to flak, 1 to fighter attack. She should be dead. She stays in formation on 2 engines, flying at maximum power, burning fuel at catastrophic rates, and makes it back across the North Sea on fumes and prayer. She lands with the fuel gauges reading 0. Mechanics find 3 gallons total remaining in all 4 tanks. The survival rate for damaged bombers in the 91st Bombardment Group jumps from 11% to 87% in 2 weeks. By mid-April, 52 bombers across 3 groups are using the Holloway Protocol, though nobody calls it that officially. Crews just know, if you get hit, you stay in the box. The box protects you. Mechanics start pre-briefing pilots, telling them the formation will slow down if necessary, telling them they're not alone. The statistics become impossible to ignore. In March, the 8th Air Force loses 43 bombers to straggler attacks. In April, after the protocol spreads unofficially through half the bomber groups, straggler losses drop to 19. In May, with widespread adoption, losses drop to 7. The official discovery happens when Brigadier General Curtis LeMay, Deputy Commander of 8 Bomber Command, reviews April loss statistics and notices something anomalous. Certain groups are losing far fewer aircraft to fighter attacks despite flying the same missions. He starts asking questions. What he finds infuriates him. Not because pilots are ignoring regulations. LeMay doesn't care about regulations, but because nobody told him earlier. He could have been saving lives. On May 12, 1943, LeMay issues Tactical Bulletin 19-43. Formation integrity for damaged aircraft. It's 6 pages of technical language that boils down to: do what Holloway has been doing. Stay in formation. Slow the formation if necessary. Accept minor collision risk to prevent major combat losses. The bulletin doesn't mention Holloway by name. It doesn't mention that this was invented by a first lieutenant who violated direct orders. It's written as if the air staff thought of it themselves. Holloway doesn't care. He's too busy flying. From the cockpit of his FW-190, Oberleutnant Klaus Dortmann watches the American formations with growing frustration. Something has changed. The tactics that worked in February and March, wait for damaged bombers to drop out, kill them individually, don't work anymore. On April 8th, he makes a combat report to his Staffelkapitän. The Americans are refusing to separate their damaged aircraft. Yesterday, I observed a B-17 with visible engine fire remaining in formation. The entire Gruppe slowed to accommodate it. This prevented isolated attack and forced us to engage the full defensive box. His squadron leader asks, "What's the tactical countermeasure?" Dortmann thinks about it. There isn't one. If they maintain formation discipline, we can only kill them by overwhelming the entire formation with coordinated attacks. That requires numerical superiority we don't currently have. The Luftwaffe tries adapting. They mass fighters for larger group attacks. They prioritize head-on passes, hoping to kill pilots before defensive fire becomes effective. They develop new tactics. None of it matters. The fundamental equation has changed. A bomber in formation, even a damaged bomber, has 10 times the survival rate of a bomber alone. On June 13, 1943, Dortmund encounters a B-17 streaming fuel from a punctured wing tank, flying on 3 engines, visibly struggling to maintain position. The easy kill. He makes 2 passes, takes heavy fire from surrounding aircraft, breaks off with hydraulic damage. The B-17 stays in formation and makes it home. Dortmund lands, fills out his combat report, and adds a personal note. The Americans have learned something important. We are killing fewer of them. By August 1943, the Holloway Protocol is standard doctrine across the entire 8th Air Force. Every bomber group, every training syllabus. Formation integrity is now the first principle of bomber survival. The production cost is 0. There's nothing to manufacture. Implementation time is immediate. Training requirement, 1 briefing. The modification factor is purely tactical and costs nothing except fuel burn from slower cruise speeds. By December 1943, the protocol has spread to the 15th Air Force in Italy, to RAF Bomber Command Heavy Bomber Squadrons, eventually to B-29 operations in the Pacific. Estimated aircraft saved, 847 bombers. Estimated lives saved, 18,470 aircrew. The official adoption is quiet. No ceremony, no medal. General LeMay issues another tactical bulletin in September, clarifying formation speed procedures. The bulletin still doesn't mention Holloway. It does mention that damaged aircraft will be supported by formation reduction in cruise speed, not to exceed 15% of standard velocity. The cost savings are extraordinary. Each B-17 costs $238,329 to manufacture. Each crew requires 9 months of training at approximately $150,000 per fully qualified crew. Holloway's protocol saves the Army Air Force an estimated $439 million in replacement costs by war's end. He never receives official credit. After the war, Garrison Holloway returns to Bakersfield and takes over his father's crop dusting business. He flies battered biplanes over cotton fields and doesn't talk about the war much. He marries Ruth Ann Kimball, a former riveter from the Douglas plant. They have 3 children. He teaches all of them to fly, illegally, before they're 16. On November 3, 1987, Holloway dies of a heart attack while changing the oil on a 1946 Stearman. He's 71 years old. The Bakersfield Californian runs a 3-paragraph obituary noting his war service and his 42 years in agricultural aviation. It doesn't mention that he invented a tactical doctrine that saved 18,000 lives. His flight logs, notebooks, and personal papers are donated to the local historical society. They sit in a cardboard box in climate-controlled storage. In 2008, a graduate student researching 8th Air Force tactics finds the notebooks and realizes what she's looking at. She writes a paper. 37 people read it. There is no monument, no Air Force base named after him. The original B-17F Duchess of Doom was scrapped in 1946 at the Kingman Reclamation Facility, cut apart and sold for aluminum at 0.04 per pound. The only physical artifact that survives is Holloway's pocket notebook from March 1943, now in the National Museum of the United States Air Force Archives. Page 12 contains his original calculation, written in pencil, showing that staying in formation increased survival probability by a factor of 7.8. The math is correct. The handwriting is terrible. Nobody visits it. The story of the Holloway Protocol teaches something the Air Force has had to relearn every 20 years. The most important innovations in warfare don't come from research labs or Pentagon working groups. They come from people who are close enough to death to understand what actually matters. Garrison Holloway was a crop duster's son who became a bomber pilot and saved more lives than most generals by doing something extraordinarily simple. He ignored a regulation that was killing his friends. He understood what the staff officers writing doctrine from Washington didn't. That sometimes the book is wrong, and the penalty for following it is death. The real tragedy isn't that he died unrecognized. It's that his story has been forgotten while the men who wrote the original faulty doctrine have memoirs and biographies and think tank fellowships. Innovation in combat doesn't flow down from command. It flows up from sergeants and lieutenants and pilots who have to live with the consequences of other people's theories. At 11:47 on Thursday, March 18, 1943, a crop duster's son from Bakersfield makes a decision that will save 18,000 lives. He doesn't know that yet. He just knows that he's not leaving his wingmen. Not today. Not ever. The formation slows. The bomber stays in the box. The wolves circle but can't close. And 40 German fighters swarming the skies over Weggessack discover that the Americans have changed the mathematics of survival.